Hello, I'm Paul Bliese. I want to take just a minute to talk about my CARMA course entitled Advanced Multilevel and Longitudinal Analyses using our mixed effect models. I developed this course for participants who had worked some with multi-level or mixed effect models and who were interested in applying these models to much more complicated data sets. So the purpose of this class is to think about how we can take the basic mixed effect or the basic growth model and apply it to cases where, for instance, you've been collecting longitudinal data over a period of time and some event occurs in the middle or someplace in the data collection period and really changes the trajectories of the outcomes that you're interested in. So we spend a big chunk of time on those with the discontinuous growth models, or situations where you've collected data, but the levels of nesting are fairly complex. So you have individuals, for instance, maybe you've collected them over time, but in addition to having individuals over time, they happen to be members of groups. So there are three levels of nesting. Or you have individuals, say you're working with some Army data, individuals who are in squads and platoons, in companies and battalions, etc. And you want to understand how the variance associated with each one of those levels influences some outcome with it. So the goal here, really, the overall goal is just how can we apply these models to some just fairly complex situations that we run into. In terms of the class structure, I do kind of anticipate that most people coming into the class will be really pretty comfortable with mixed effect models, and also that they'll be pretty comfortable with R. I teach the whole course in R, which is not to say that you can't get something out of it if you know another program. It's just that my expertise is really within R, so I won't be able to answer many questions about M+ or other programs as you're going through with it. I also, in terms of the course, encourage participants to bring their own data. I give a lot of examples and I break out the class in ways where you're not just listening to me talk, you get to work with some data and you get to have hands-on experience. But if you have your own data and you can apply the examples to that, that's the ideal case really for learning the material as you go through with it. In terms of the structure, the way that I have the class laid out for participants, I will start the class by doing just a very quick introduction of the basic two-level model and the basic growth model in R, so that I know that everybody's on the same and equal foundation going forward with the class. And then at that point, I like to bring in some of the information or talk a little bit about econometric fixed effect models and introduce those, and largely because there's some confusion in terms of how mixed effect and fixed effect models, how you get different estimates. And many of us who work in business schools have colleagues who are in strategy, or we work with economists or people who have been trained kind of with an econometric background. So I want to show some of the parallels from there. And then I move into the discontinuous growth model. We spent quite a chunk of time working on that particular one, as I indicated on that, with some neat variations for how you can model different trajectories, different changes that go over time. Then I switch over to working with empirical Bayes estimates, which is another neat way to capture information, typically longitudinal information, and integrate it into the models. From there, I will go into a module that has some very complex models, 3-level, 4-level models, and also a variation of that, which is the longitudinal model, where individuals are over time nested within groups, and where we can start to model things like consensus emergence. We can see, do groups develop a shared perception of some phenomena faster or slower? What might be some predictors of whether or not a group does or does not have consensus emergence evolve on there. And then finally, the last module we work with is one in which we're dealing with dichotomous data and thinking about how do we apply these linear mixed effects models to a case where we don't have a normally distributed outcome, so generalized linear mixed effect models. Anyhow, I hope you found this video useful, and I look forward to seeing you in class.